Well, if it's spring, it must be time for another release of AutoCAD and the rest of the Autodesk products. Today, I'm going to focus on what's new in AutoCAD 2019. So there's about 6 areas of new functionality in the latest release of AutoCAD, and they fall into 6 categories. We've got a new function called Drawing Compare. We've got AutoCAD Shared Views, improvements to named views and viewports, improvements to layer property overrides, a bunch of changes for 4K displays, and a bunch of performance improvements. So let me go through these very quickly and explain to you what you're going to see that's new in AutoCAD 2019. The first area of improvement is the new Drawing Compare functionality. So what this allows you to do is to compare 2 drawings to see what's different between them. Because if you were to just look at 2 complex drawings by eye, you would never really be able to pick out all of the changes. So the new Drawing Compare functionality lets you compare either an open drawing and an unopened drawing, or just 2 drawings that you choose from a file. And once you start a comparison session, you can see what has changed. The program will run a quick comparison and then show you graphically what has changed. It'll show you what's in one drawing that's different from the second drawing in green, and what's in the second drawing that's different from the first drawing in red. You can change the colors that it uses. It will also produce a revision cloud around the areas that are different between the drawings. And depending on a setting that you can control, it will draw the revision cloud to encompass a bunch of changes in one revision cloud, or break each individual change out into individual revision clouds. So you have control over that. It's sort of like the comparison feature when you're working with revisions in Microsoft Word. Once you get done running a comparison, you can save the comparison results as a new drawing file, or just simply discard the comparison results once you understand the differences between the 2 drawings. So that's Drawing Compare. The next area that is new in AutoCAD 2019 is Shared Views. So the whole idea behind Shared Views is to make it easier for you to share your designs with other people with whom you might be working on a project. So rather than sending drawings back and forth as PDFs or DWGs, you can now share a version of your drawing in the cloud. This produces a shareable link that you can then simply email to someone, and then they can use the Drawing Compare and essentially the AutoCAD viewer online to open up that link, and then they can view, review, measure, markup, and comment on the shared view that you've placed out there. You can access this through a website, which is essentially going to then open up the AutoCAD viewer online. There's also a new palette inside of AutoCAD which will track all of the views that you've shared and any comments and markups that you or any other person with whom you've shared that drawing make while they're reviewing the materials that you've put out there. Once a comment is marked as complete, you can mark it as complete. It will no longer show up in your dashboard, but you can still go back to the online viewer and reveal elements or items that have been marked as complete so that you can still access them, and then they'll still show up again in that palette. Anything that you share automatically becomes unshared after 30 days, but you can go in at any time and extend the sharing of any view that you've shared for an additional 30 days. And of course, you can add people that you want to share with, remove people from that list, so you've got complete control over it. But it's a great way for sharing your designs without having to give away your DWG files or first create a DWF or a PDF file to use for sharing. The next area is one of the ones that I'm particularly excited about, and this is being able to use named views and immediately import a named view as a viewport in a paper space layout. So I don't know if you use layouts for the version of your drawings that you're going to print. This is definitely the best practice. Layouts, of course, have been around, and paper space has been around for years, but I still know a lot of people just produce everything in model space and just print from model space, and then they have to deal with whether or not they've created text and annotations and dimensions with proper text height and arrow sizes. The nice thing about using layouts is you don't have to think about it. The layout is essentially the piece of paper that you're going to plot, and then you plot that layout at full size. But if you create named views in model space, it's now very simple. There's a new command that will simply bring that named view into your paper space layout as a viewport in that layout. And if you realize that you want to create a new viewport and it makes sense to have a named view to associate with that viewport, you can now, while you're working in the layout and creating your viewports, create named views on the fly. So it becomes a much more seamless way of creating model space viewports, these floating viewports that you're then going to place in paper space layouts and use for your documentation. And then the last change that's truly a new functionality inside of AutoCAD is a series of enhancements to layer property overrides. So you may have noticed in AutoCAD 2018 that when you created a layer property override for a override that you created for a layout viewport that you placed on a layout, that you saw some hints if you opened up the layer property manager to let you know that you had made an override, you had made a change to the way layers were going to be displayed in that viewport. You can now also, when you create an override to an external reference or an override to the visual properties, so these are the color, the line type, the line weight, or the transparency of any layer associated with a viewport or an external reference, there is now a special icon that appears in the Layer Properties Manager, and when you hover the cursor over that icon or any of the layer name or any of those visual properties, a tooltip shows up in the Layer Properties Manager that shows you exactly what override you applied. So for example, if you change the color of the external reference layer, it will now show you that you have applied a color override. So it'll show you what the color of that layer was originally defined as well as the color that you've overridden. And then you can use the right-click shortcut menu to quickly reverse or revert any of those overrides back to their default if you so desire. You also get a colored background applied to any layer and any visual property override that has been applied to anything that shows up in the Layer Properties Manager. And there's now enhancements to the layer settings dialog that enables you to apply different colors. So perhaps you want to be able to quickly see whether the layer property override was an override that was applied to an external reference or applied to the visual property of a viewport. And so you can actually have those show up color-coded with the backgrounds being two different colors. When you use the Layer Filters panel inside the Layer Properties Manager now, in addition to the filter that has always been there that shows you the list of all the layers that have been used, and then you can click Invert and it'll show you all the layers that haven't been used, there's now a new layer property filter that will show up if any overrides have been applied, so you can quickly filter that list and see only the layer overrides that have been assigned to either viewports or external references. And then there are two other changes that one of which you'll probably see almost immediately. That is that all of the icons that appear on buttons in the ribbon have been changed. And this was done in part to accommodate 4K displays. So Autodesk has been saying for several releases now that they're fixing AutoCAD so it displays properly on 4K displays. They've pretty much taken care of that now in terms of dialog boxes, but now they've gone ahead and they've redone every button. All those buttons are now flattened out. There used to be some buttons that really looked 3D in nature. They flattened everything out now and redesigned them so that they truly display very well on both a 2K display, so that would be a 1920 by 1080 display, or a 4K display. And then the last thing that I mentioned is performance improvements. You will see some additional performance improvements when working in 2D in AutoCAD, and the visual controls, so the graphic performance dialog box has been enhanced to provide you even more granularity in terms of the settings that you can apply to control the graphic performance. Although if you just take the defaults out of the box, it appears to be working very, very well. And then there's also considerable performance improvement when working in 2D, when plotting or looking at a plot preview, and when navigating in 3D. So this is just Autodesk going through the database and figuring out how to extract better performance when you're working with AutoCAD. Of course, in AutoCAD 2018, that process was done in large part because Autodesk changed the DWG file format with 2018. So 2018 is a different file format than what you had in 2014, 15, 16, and 17. The file format has not changed for AutoCAD 2019. It is now still using the same file format as in 2018. And in fact, it's worth noting that all of the improvements that I've just noted, the drawing compare, the AutoCAD shared views, the named views as viewports, and the layer property overrides that are being touted as new features in AutoCAD 2019 were actually added to the 2018.1 release. So if you are on subscription, and I assume if you're using AutoCAD 20, if you were using AutoCAD 2018, you were on subscription because that was the only way to get that release of AutoCAD. If you did install the 2018.1 update, you've already seen all of these new features that have now been incorporated and added into AutoCAD 2019. So that in a nutshell is what's new in AutoCAD 2019. Over the course of the next few months, of course, I'll be writing about these features in greater detail. In our CAD learning lessons, I have now enhanced the lessons, so when Autodesk starts shipping AutoCAD 2019, you will be able to find lessons that cover all these new enhancements and how to use them to extract the best performance and the best productivity out of AutoCAD 2019. So I hope this proves useful, and I will certainly update you as Autodesk provides information about any new things that they're working on in the software. Thanks for joining us.